Hey guys, here's a follow-up from my last video where I demoed the React Native multiplayer game I made called Salad Bowl. In this video, I will go more in depth about how different features in the app function. I highly recommend checking out my last video if you haven't already because it gives a little more context as to how the game flows. Otherwise, the game might be a little bit confusing to you. In this video, I'll specifically be going over how I use React Native and Firebase to coordinate different features in the game, such as maintaining the game logic, keeping the device screens in sync, and having the game status update even when you leave the app and come back into it. Alright, so let's get right into it with the game logic. So right here I have on the right side is the Firebase real-time database, and this is where I'm storing all of the individual game information, such as like the game codes and stuff like that. So we can first start off by creating a game on the first phone right here, and when I create a game you can see that these fields pretty much get filled up with data that I'll be using throughout the game. So if I open this up, oh, we can see this is the game code that was generated over here and over here, and we split it up into games, players, and later on you'll see that words will pop up as well once we add in words. So now that we have this game code that's generated, we can join the game from another device. So let's say this is Bob, and you can type in the same code. So then with this, now we can see all of this information. So we have the players in the game, which are Ali and Bob. We can see how many words are per person, so we know how many inputs to show for each device. And then also we can see which players we're waiting on to submit words. So right now, that's where this comes in, the waiting state. So if I submitted words from the first phone, I can see that this gets automatically removed. Ali gets removed from here. Ali turns into ready because waiting is Ali is no longer in this waiting object over here. And now you can see that there's a new category called words, and it has the ROBXX game code. And this is how we signify which lobby or which game you're in. So if you have more games going on concurrently and all that stuff, you'll have more of these codes going on here. So you'll have games ROBXX, ABCD, whatever the next game codes that are generated are. So then from over here, we can see what information is being stored per word. You have the word itself and whether it's been played, as well as this unique identifier for the word. So that lets you pretty much put in multiple words. If one person puts in the same word as another one, in my game it's acceptable, but I could add logic later on if I wanted to make it so only like one word per person. There's only like unique words in the game. So what else we have over here is the status of the game. So right now we're in the lobby. We also have game finish, and that's pretty much it. Oh, we also have team, and that's when the teams get split up. And once this changes, all the devices pretty much switch up from there. I'll go more in depth about that a little bit later on. We have the overall score for the team. So at this point, this is a little irrelevant because the teams haven't even been made yet. We have the rounds, so there's up to 3 rounds. This doesn't really make sense right now because the game hasn't started, so you wouldn't even have a round yet. And the current player doesn't make sense as well right now because we're not even playing the game as well again right now. And then we can see that Ali is the host of the game, and this is the same ID that is over here. So now we'll just go ahead on this device and put in some more words. So once you click submit, you see that you get removed from waiting, words were updated, and now we can see the words over here. So now we can go ahead and continue. So now I guess right now I can go on to kind of show you guys how both of the devices changed at the same time. So the way I'm able to do that is because each of these screens that are shown in React Native are basically listening to a specific value in the database anytime that screen is mounted. So for example, right now the team screen is mounted. So as soon as it's mounted, it checks for status and it waits for it to change to something different. Once it changes into something different, then it'll go ahead and update itself to go to the next page. And one thing to keep in mind though is that this status is only updated by one device at a time. So if you had a bunch of devices updating it all at the same time, you could most likely run into some condition where like one device updates it to something and then the other device updates it to something else, and then there's a little bit of a conflict. So that's the main reason why I had a host. Otherwise, multiple people can create a team or set up the team, and the team will be made like a bunch of different times. It's unnecessary calls to the database. So from here, we can see that the teams are made. So another thing I also want to mention is that this game is played with a minimum of 4 people, but right now this game is in its development environment. So in this mode, I only make it so that you only need 2 devices, even though you really can't play with 2 people. But it works because you can just have one person on one team, the other person on the other team. But when you're actually playing this, that it wouldn't make sense for it to work. So we'll go ahead and start, and you'll notice when I click start, this status will update and both the screens will change. See, there you go right there. And then you also see that a couple other things that were changed. So you see like anytime it highlights yellow, that means that signifies that those values have changed and were updated in the database itself. So one of the things that we saw was that the status changed to game. We saw round is 1. We see that the current player also changed, and it was added as this player. So the current player that's going to be playing right now is Bob, which is the second device right here. And then it also shows which team they're on. So we can just go ahead and click got it on this, and the way those little modules pop up is from listening to this round information, because at any point during the game, the round can change, whether it's in between their turn or anything like that. So the next thing we can do is just go ahead and click start. So when I click start, the turn start timestamp starts, and this is basically when this individual's turn started. And this might be a little bit of a weird way to do it, just because it's like every device is kind of like counting down from it. But another alternative would have been to automatically update this database every second and then send that update to every single device. But that requires an unnecessary amount of calls to the database and all that kind of stuff. And also another thing that I didn't want to do is indicate whether the timer was going or not going, because one of the things that causes is inconsistencies between the timings between different devices. So if you look right here, if I just exited out of this device, out of the app, and then I come back in, you see that the timing still stays consistent even though I was out of the app for a couple seconds. And the reasoning for that is because this turn start timestamp was saved into the React Native state, so that now anytime you go back to it, you can just subtract the current time from that timestamp. Or I'm sorry, you can subtract that timestamp from the current time, and then you'll get that number in milliseconds, and that's what you pretty much show here, just rounded to seconds. So that's pretty much how I was able to keep a lot of the stuff in sync at the same time as all of the other devices. And now if you also click start, we'll start the second person's turn, and now you can see the current player changed to Ali, and he is on team 1. So if we click next, we can see that a bunch of things updated. So right here, the team score updates, the players were updated when the turn started. So basically what happens is that anytime you have played on that turn for that team, then that has played value becomes true. And the reasoning for this is so that if you have like maybe 5 players on each team, one player won't be able to go again for another until all the other players have gone. And that's basically what it looks for. And another thing we also keep track of is how many points that individual person has made. So if you click next again, that person made 2 points now. And then if you click pass, that person loses a point because they gave a point to the opposing team. So we can pretty much go through this game, and it's pretty cool seeing how everything is being live updated, and basically the devices are just listening to certain values within this database to see like what should be done on their phone. So that ended round two, and because this that ended round one, and because this round changed to two, the little modal popped up saying that okay, now we're on round two. Let's display this little modal to the user, and at the same time, the device timer stopped, and that's because the current player submitted a change to the database to update everything. So now you kind of see how there's only one device changing everything while everything else is listening. And once this timer pretty much ends, this device assigns a new player to take control, and that new device is the only device that can make changes to the database, while every other device is just listening. And also another thing that we can look at is the turn time. So notice how before it was 60,000 for 60,000 milliseconds. Right now it's 47,000 whatever, because um, once the round ended, we had some sort of amount of time remaining. So that goes into the turn time, and that's pretty much sent out to everyone else. And this is useful because if someone went out of the app and then went back in, they can see that the turn timestamp changed, but we no longer have that 60-second time frame to look after. We have that 47 seconds or whatever to look after. So now we can just continue on with this game until we go to round three, and then we can finish it up. And over here you can see the status of the game is now finished, and now we can just go home. So if you go home on this device, it removes that current player that was there from that spot. We can just click later over here, and then when we go home here, it basically deletes the entire game as a whole, which is really cool because now this entire database is no longer storing any information about that game whatsoever. So it's basically a self-cleaning database. But there's also another problem. So what if someone starts a game but then ends the game in the middle without actually clicking go home? So what happens there is that the game will still exist because that last person's never clicked go home. And the way that we're able to self-clean that is that anytime you create a new game, we check to see, okay, is there a game that is that was created over 24 hours ago? If so, we'll go ahead and delete all the values for that game. And the way we're able to do that is by, again, looking at the the timestamp for the game itself. So we just look at the timestamp right here, and if that is more than 24 hours ago, we'll just go ahead and delete this entire game, all the players for that associated game ID, as well as all the words for that game ID. And that pretty much sums up how the database pretty much connects to the app. So it's pretty simple, but I think that it was a really cool way to have React Native interact with Firebase's real-time database, and I think it's a really cool way to create a game this way. I know this game isn't really a traditional game just because you don't really have like you have to play with multiple people, and like you have to be there in person or through like a video chat or something like that. So it's like in the genre of like charades or like heads up. But I just thought that it was a really cool way to interact these two services, these two tools together. So that pretty much sums up everything for the game in terms of like the different features and how all of that goes through. So I would like to say thank you so much for watching. If you want to go into the code and see how each thing is done individually, you can check out my GitHub repo for this salad bowl project, linked in the description. If you want to play this game with your friends, it's actually on the App Store right now, and that link is also in the description. Let me know in the comments down below if you want to know more in depth about like specific features and how I implemented it, I guess. And also, if you found this video useful, then go ahead and give it a like. Other than that, thanks so much for watching.